All right, so you've given us quite a challenge with this deep dive. Comparing modern America to the fall of the Roman Empire. I mean, it's a lot to unpack.
It is.
But after looking through this book, honestly, some of these parallels they're sending chills down my spine.
Yeah, it's a classic case of history, rhyming, not repeating.
Right.
We can learn a lot from these past civilizations, even if our technology and social structures are, vastly different.
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about this. Like, no toga is required for this deep dive, but get ready for some serious food for thought. And what's fascinating is that we're experiencing this comparison in a uniquely modern way. This book, comparing the fall of Rome to the U.S. today, it's available as an audiobook. And get this, it's narrated by the author himself, Tom Brooks.
And this isn't Brooks's first rodeo in the audiobook booth.
Right.
The guy has voiced like over 400 audiobooks on Audible. Talk about a seasoned narrator.
It adds this whole other layer to the experience. It's like we're getting a firsthand account of history, both past and potentially present, from someone who's really, truly immersed in the world of storytelling. But before we, get lost in the meta of it all, let's jump into the content. So the book dives right into some pretty startling parallels between Rome's fall and, well, the U.S. today.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
What's that?
Tom Brooks, the author, he was actually inspired to write this book after listening to, get this, Elon Musk.
No way.
Yeah, talk about strange pairing. But Brooks heard Musk speak at a Trump rally, of all places, about the importance of civic duty.
Interesting.
And it really got him thinking. He even dedicated the book to Musk, called him Rocket Man in the dedication.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It really speaks to this idea that even amidst, the chaos of modern politics, there are these deep concerns about the future of our nation, like echoing anxieties felt, all the way back during Rome's decline. And speaking of anxieties, remember the whole debt ceiling debacle a while back?
Oh, how could I forget?
Brooks draws a direct line between that and the way Rome used taxation to fund its military and expansion.
It's like they were taxing themselves into oblivion.
Yeah. And it wasn't just the amount of tax that was problematic,
Right.
but the way it was levied. It was this huge burden on the lower and middle classes.
Stifling innovation, social mobility, really crippling their economy from the inside out.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
Does Brooks suggest any parallels to how taxes impact different groups in the U.S. today?
Oh, absolutely. He argues that, we're seeing a similar trend right now, this growing income inequality, the burden of taxation disproportionately impacting certain segments of American society. He even goes so far as to ask, are we headed down a similar path?
And that leads us to another parallel the book explores. Inflation.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the Roman denarius?
Vaguely remind me.
Right, so it was their currency.
Yeah.
They kept, decreasing the silver content in their coins to fund all their wars and lavish projects.
Cutting corners.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by the 3rd century, the denarius was practically worthless,
Oh, no.
leading to, you guessed it, economic chaos.
Mm.
And Brooks draws a direct line between that and concerns surrounding the U.S. dollar in today's, volatile global market.
It's a stark reminder that even the mightiest empires, they're built on shady ground if their economic foundations crumble. And it's not just, the economic parallels that are concerning. The book also really dives into the decline of the Roman military, which is fascinating.
Well, yeah.
So you have these legendary legions, right, known for their discipline, their might.
Right.
And they end up relying heavily on mercenaries.
Oh, no.
With, questionable loyalty.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster, right?
Well, history seems to think so. And Brooks connects this to, the U.S. military's increasing reliance on private military contractors.
Mm-hmm.
It raises some really interesting questions, like who actually holds the power in those situations, the potential for, conflicting interests.
Right.
And what are the long-term implications for national security?
It's like the nature of threats has changed too,
Yeah.
right? The book, it highlights this shift from barbarian invasions at the border to cyber attacks from, across the globe. It's a whole different battleground. But are the challenges really that different?
That's a great question. And that's the point Brooks emphasizes. It's not just about, military might anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's about adaptability, understanding how threats are evolving,
Right.
recognizing that the most dangerous enemies, well, they aren't always the ones, right at your doorstep.
Okay, so we've got economic instability, military concerns, and if that's not enough, let's add political turmoil to the mix.
Ah, yes, Roman politics. Brooks really doesn't hold back here. He actually compares the political climate in ancient Rome to, like, a reality show waiting to happen.
Right. It's like weak leaders, constant power struggles, corruption scandals. It's almost eerie how familiar it all sounds.
Exactly. And that's precisely Brooks's point. He draws these uncomfortable parallels to the political climate in the US today. Concerns about political polarization, gridlock, a decline in trust in leadership.
It's funny because it's not funny.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, how did they function at all with all of that going on?
Well, for a time they did, but the book highlights this period called the crisis of the 3rd century.
Right.
Imagine 50 years, right,
Sure,
with
sure.
20 different emperors all vying for power.
Wow. Yeah.
It was a time of just intense political instability and violence.
Wow.
Almost tore Rome apart. And Brooks suggests that while the U.S., we haven't quite reached that level of chaos, there are some worrying signs, especially if we don't start addressing the underlying issues of our political systems.
Okay, I'm officially starting to feel a little uneasy now. But you mentioned something earlier about Brooks not just focusing on doom and gloom.
That's right, yeah. He also explores this really interesting concept of, it's called Romanitas.
Romitas.
Yeah, it's this idea of civic pride, a shared identity,
Okay.
a commitment to their traditional values.
So what happened? Did they just lose their Romanness?
In a way, yeah, you could say that. You see, the book argues that this erosion of Romanitas, this decline in civic virtue was a major factor in their decline. Citizens became more focused on personal gain, less invested in the well-being of the empire as a whole.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? And Brooks definitely sees those parallels. He connects that decline of civic virtue in Rome to, our concerns today about declining social responsibility here in the U.S., a rise in individualism. He even quotes that old saying, "A house divided against itself cannot stand."
So where do we go from here? I mean, is the U.S. destined to just repeat Rome's mistakes?
Well, Brooks seems to believe that history doesn't have to repeat itself. The Roman Empire, it didn't just vanish overnight. It actually split in two.
Oh, right.
You had the Western Roman Empire and then the Eastern Roman Empire.
Which became the Byzantine Empire.
Exactly, Byzantine Empire. And they lasted for centuries longer.
They did, yeah.
Brooks uses this historical example to illustrate that even when you're facing these seemingly insurmountable challenges, there's always a potential for adaptation, for survival.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom. But if we're drawing these parallels to Rome, where does that leave us? What can we learn from their mistakes?
Well, Brooks really emphasizes the importance of individual action as a starting point. Just as that decline in civic engagement contributed to Rome's downfall, he believes that a resurgence of active citizenship here in the U.S. could be key to our survival.
So more than just voting in elections.
Oh, absolutely. He talks about, engaging in local politics, holding your elected officials accountable, staying informed, being engaged citizens. It sounds simple, but he argues that it's this kind of grassroots action that can really have a ripple effect.
It's like taking ownership of your own society.
Yes.
Not just being a passive bystander.
Exactly. But he also says it goes beyond just individual action, too. Yeah. The book also emphasizes the need for some serious systemic changes.
Okay, let's get specific. What kind of systemic changes are we talking about?
Well, he tackles some tough issues. I mean, he talks about addressing economic inequality through things like tax reform, strengthening social safety nets, campaign finance reform to address the influence of money in politics.
Yeah, those are pretty hot button topics.
They are, but the book argues that we can't shy away from these difficult conversations any longer. He uses that Roman example, right, to highlight what can happen when political systems become too corrupt or beholden to special interests.
Right.
He sees it as a call to action, both for citizens and for leaders, to really prioritize the common good over personal gain.
It's interesting to think about how Brooks chose to present all of this information as an audiobook. He could have gone with the traditional print format, but having him narrate it himself, especially given his experience with over 400 audiobooks under his belt, it adds this whole other level of weight to the message.
I agree. Yeah, it's almost as if he's speaking directly to us,
Right.
urging us to listen, to learn from the mistakes of the past.
It's like he's bridging that gap between history and the present moment, reminding us that we have a say in how this story unfolds. And for you, dear listener, that's where we leave you today, with a choice. Brooks has laid out the parallels, the warnings, the potential solutions. Now the question is, what will you do with this information? Will you be a passive observer, or will you take action and become an active participant in shaping the future? Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those deep dives going.